We're going to talk a bit about yesterday. As what we want to do is review some of the things that I went through yesterday. There's going to be indicators that I'm going to bring in here in this presentation we're about to go through. Then we'll get into actual trading. We'll talk about some of the elements on intraday trading. The biggest focus, I think, we're going to spend some time here on day trading. This is what I'm expecting, is that we're going to get through this front end of the section and day trading, and that will get us to our 2-hour break. The last 2 hours is going to be swing trading, positioning, understanding trends, a whole bunch of concepts I want to try to bring in. I want you to be able to have the ability to do the same analysis that I am doing when I'm on the YouTube channel. I want that perspective, how to correlate and match up, and what's the important trends. So we're going to talk about the emotional black hole and live analysis and trading. We'll also the swing trading, intermediate trends, characteristics, validations, understanding and integrating long-term trends. I think that's probably one of the most significant things we can do. This is a little bit different setup, but these are the general 30,000 foot view of what I'm going to cover today. Welcome, everyone. Day one recap. When you're trading, just the journaling process, overcoming of emotions, and talking about getting the strategy. Now, we didn't do a lot of setup strategies. That's what we're going to do today. We did psychology and theory for the most part. We went through the indicators and we started to get into, this is why I'll go back and review these, and we'll make sure that I pay attention to the chat when we get to that final section, so you folks can ask questions, because those questions need to be answered. That's the point of being here, and all of us taking out 8 hours of our life in 2 days. So we're really appreciative of. So this whole emotional thing, and I'll go through this in a minute when we start setting up the day trading scenario. We'll get through that, but we talked about the importance of a strategy. We didn't really develop this strategy yesterday. It was all theory for the most part. So I'm going to do my best to try to get the step-by-step situation in there. There's a couple screens that I told you I was trying to create, and I think I got most of this stuff in, but probably the thing that we're going to do is I'll put up like a whiteboard that I can talk on, that I can scribble on and show you some of these setups and things. So still got here, understanding the indicators, like I said, based on feedback we just had as we started the meeting, that we're really looking at going through the settings and things of that sort. And the things we need to go through, because we need to have the WaveTech webs. We're going to have the daily projection on the intraday. We're going to look at multi-time series. Some of you saw that 4-screen chart that I had set up a few minutes ago. And then we're once again, the importance of a strategy and applying all the indicators and understanding what they're meaning at every time. So there's so many nuances that are likely to occur as you're utilizing the PPMs. It gets confusing, so you have to start to focus in, and that's one of the things I'm going to try to get you to focus in on. What element on the chart, if you're looking at trying to combine all three of the PPMs all the time, it's really going to be, talked about this a bit yesterday when we went through the PPMs, that you get into that firm trend mode and you pick a dominant trend that's in there, and that's going to be the number that you're going to key off as you're watching things unfold. Let's talk about the webs. I've got some of the screens that we had yesterday. We'll talk about the webs, and then I'm going to lead you right into bringing them up on a screen and talk about some of the patterns and some of those things. So I'll bring up a separate screen that all we have on there is webs in just a few minutes. So I'm going to do these reviews, and we'll look at settings as we go through this next review. The webs I described them yesterday, and with their linear regressions, their time series is from 2 to 21, and they're nothing proprietary about the webs. They're just linear regressions, period, okay? Nothing fancy about them. What is, we'll call it the proprietary section of what there is in there, is the interpretation and the patterns that I've been recognizing for a long time. Once I get through day trading and a number of things, I'm going to bring in the market flow indicator, which will give us directional movement. Now, I'm going to go through that. That's kind of the tail end of what we'll do in second session today. The patterns, I mentioned this yesterday, the webs are probably the best pattern recognition tool. And not only pattern recognition tool, the way that the flow of the linear regressions tells you a lot about the trend and strength, a whole lot of things that you can garner from there. And oftentimes you want to get, maybe you did a trade setup, and I'm going to show you a couple of trades that I did in a few minutes where I was selling. It was early this morning. I think it was pre-open where I did a couple of these trades. Market was rallying up, and I was just typically would get a reaction off that open. But I layered in some sells, and then I'm looking for so I just want you to see some of those setups. I've got a number of screenshots that I did this morning, just trying to set that up. And you're also going to see some of the web setups on there. And the screenshots that I'm going to show you are from TradeStation, but we'll kind of go back and forth for TradingView. These indicators are going to give you not only market direction, but give you some indication of when the market's rolling over. There's some patterns that we'll be talking about. I'll show you when we get on some real-time charts here. Then you'll start to pick up the consolidation points across the turning points and all that stuff. And it's all going to go in as part of the overall suite of things. We're going to have PPMs, and the moving average is going to be a whole lot of stuff that we're going to compile into, hey, this is what's going to happen. And I've talked about this on tweets that I've done. I've talked about this in my daily YouTube videos, but the hourly chart can be really powerful at catching a pretty good turn. There's scalping, and then there's kind of swing trading intraday where you're going for a little bit bigger swing. And we're going to set up a whole lot of tools to get through that. I'm also going to put the trend probability up there. And this one's interesting because it's confusing whether it's telling you it can cross or it can't cross. I'll hopefully clear that up a little bit here. But there's a number that I will remind you of here shortly on the 5-second chart, a 16% probability. That's the magic 16. So I'll when we get into that 5-second chart, I'm not sure I'm going to convince you folks to use a 5-second chart, but I want you to see what my process is. So then we're going to use the pattern finder. We saw that yesterday. Main thing, somebody asked the question earlier is, what pivots, how is this thing being calculated? I'll reveal that. Once again, this is just there's the old zigzag indicator, does a decent job of marking patterns, but this is precise. It's really, really good. There's a little bit of a lag on the marks, but you can anticipate the lag. Hopefully we talk about that. Those of you that were ever in the live room, we used to spend a lot of time talking about those, and we can put the pivot points. There's a whole lot of stuff. I mean, we could spend hours doing that. We really could. So I'm going to try to do my best to consolidate. Then if you folks have some questions, that will be it. Let's go on. So the daily projection is pretty straightforward. That's just the daily market grid on the intraday chart. We were just about hitting the RTX level today intraday. So I'll be showing you what that looks like here because it was right there. Actually a perfect day for that. And I think we've exceeded it now. And then we've got the STX buy signal. I am going for intraday. I'm going to show you what I've done. Hopefully there's some good marks on here. I mentioned this yesterday when I was reviewing this indicator, is I put it on a 5-minute chart and look for a certain number of STX buys. And it's really good for a pivot. So then we'll go to other tools. So I'm going to try to do a number of things. I think that is way better than the cycle finder by far, what I've been able to setting up the concepts here on day trading. This is the hardest thing that anybody ever does. And having had we'll call it opportunity or experience to be on a trading floor back in the old days. Talk about emotional. It was really emotional when you're standing in a group of people, hundreds of them possibly, and you're feeling all the emotions, and some guy just put a bad trade in. He's just trying to get out, and you can see it all over his face. You can see he's having a really bad day. I used to always say, if you want, you could go to CBOT. There was, when they built the annex, there's a big, long escalator comes down from the trading floor. Everybody has to exit. Like, you come down and you exit at the bottom. And you can see by just standing there what kind of day that person had on the floor. I mean, it is written all over their face. There's some long faces and staring down at the stairs. So this is a very emotional environment. And it's funny, I always tell folks I can still hear the screaming. I'll go to a trade station, even though we're kind of focused on using all the indicators on TradingView, but TradeStation has the level 2, and we'll talk a little bit about level 2. When I'm trading, for the most part, especially if I'm doing a scalping session, I am going to be paying more attention to the order book than the charts. I'm glancing at the charts and I'm watching the order book and I'm watching the flow, and I get a tremendous amount of feel from there. So I don't think I can, I've said this in the live room, I don't think I can teach that, but I can talk to you about some of the things I've seen. So we're going to dig in fairly deep. And like I said, we're going to go through and show the process and setup using all the indicators that we were just talking about a minute ago. And then we're going to look at multi-time series. And I set up a setup on TradingView. I'll show you where it is. I'm not an expert by any means on TradingView, but you can set up a multiple chart setup. So you can do a split screen. I chose the 4 quarters, and you'll see it here in just a few minutes. We're going to talk about how to utilize and how to look at these Fibonacci targets. And I think based on the questions that were coming up before we get started officially here, is I'll throw up some of the pivots. I'll do my best to kind of unpack this without confusing anybody, because when we get this all set up, there is a ton of moving targets. There's a lot to look at. This is one of the things we talked about yesterday, but we talked about something being the levels of competence. And one of the things that you see on the level of competence is once you get really used to seeing all of this flow, all these moving parts, what I'm hoping to show you is a way to compact that into one thought: buy or sell, right? That's the thought. It's just very complex. So to get in this, it takes a lot of practice. I have been in front of live screens, probably 2010 and 11, and I was doing a lot of scalping back in those days. But you get into a competence level, and I talked about it yesterday. The unconscious incompetent doesn't know that he doesn't know. Conscious incompetent says, I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, we've all been there. And then you finally get these techniques down and you go, oh, I get it. But you got to focus. You got to put the blinders on, and you can't move. And the focus is really hard. I talked about that yesterday. Most people, for me at least, about 2 hours is what all you can do. And that's how a lot of people got in trouble back in trading floor days too. You stay on, you get fatigued, you're standing up, you're screaming, and you get fatigued and you start doing stupid things. So you have to be able to take yourself out. Some of the pits that I've been in, if you leave, you don't ever get back to where you were. So we don't have that issue anymore. We get to step away. I've got over in the side room, I got a treadmill. I've got my iPad. I can put my quotes, and I can if I need a break, I can still watch these screens. I have a remote hookup, so I can see over there. So sometimes it's just break away, get off the markets, and do that. So then ultimately you get to the level, and I talk about this, where sports folks get into the zone. And the zone is where you don't even have to think about it. You just see stuff and just react. I know in the old live room, I used to have to explain. I would do a trade. I'm like, oh, no one has any idea why I just did that trade. And so I would try to reverse engineer that back. One of the other things is, I mentioned yesterday, a strategy. We're going to go through that as well. Before we do that, however, I'm going to go through some of these indicators that I mentioned, the webs and some of these the components first. Then we'll start applying and doing everything. So the strategy basics of what I'm going to show you on that strategy is actually the basic trade expectation. This would be more of a swing. That's an art form, to say the least, and that's mostly the order book reading. The strategy, hopefully we'll get some setups there. There's actually, my goal is I'm hoping that we catch a good 15 or 30 minute sequence that we can get involved in. Obviously, taking profits, understanding sometimes when to abort a trade. I'll try to talk about a lot of these things. Hopefully, it won't end up being too abstract that I'll be able to tie it together. And then the mitigating risk, which is I'll show you a technique of you want to do multiple trade entries. It's very difficult to buy something at a point and sell it at a point, in my opinion. Typically, there's a scale in process for me, and then there's a scale out process, and I'm going to do my best to set that. Okay. Things that some of you are aware of. I talk about extreme values is that what I call the spike trade. That is a scalp trade, and it works really good. It can be pretty risky, so you have to be careful about the size. And a lot of times when the spike trade happens, we would need like a news event. And so